What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the reveal of the number 14 team in my 2019 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the San Francisco 49ers. And for those of you that have been following this channel, it is no secret that I am pretty high on this team. You got to go back to January. Well, I was already very high on Jimmy Garoppolo at the time, but after kind of digging into Kyler Murray, we went into a bit of a hot take and said Kyler Murray would go first overall in the draft. And with the foresight there to see then that Nick Bosa was going to fall right into this Niners team's lap, which is a huge need for them. And just with that combination, I really did think that at 45-1, that was the best bet you could make at the time. Now, that said, a lot's changed since then, not just with this team, but with the rest of the NFL. We've had free agency and the draft since then, a lot of crazy trades. So this video is going to have a lot of interesting things to talk about. It's obviously a team that I am very high on, but it is a team that still has left some holes on this roster that we got to talk on as well. So if you enjoy, if you learn something, please do hit that like button. It's the easiest way to support this channel and share this video. Also subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any uploads as we go through these deep dives. If you also want to support the channel, use promo code FranchiseGuy on SeatGeek. The next time you're shopping for tickets, you're going to get the best prices there anyway, so you can save $20 on your next purchase. If you're new to the series, what we do, we go through the roster, we rank each position, how they stack up against the rest of the league. While we do that, you're going to be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So yes, it is a video game, but they are my own ratings, and it accurately shows how I perceive each player. After that, we go through the schedule, we go game by game, talk about this team's Vegas over-under and my win total expectations for this team. And now that we're getting towards the better portion of the NFL, we do have to talk about division odds, playoff odds, Super Bowl odds. Just like we mentioned, that's going to be an interesting conversation for this Niners team at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around. So obviously here with San Francisco, they had their problems last year. This defense was horrendous. They really couldn't figure anything out on that side of the ball. On the offensive side, they actually did get some things going, though. They established a really nice offensive line here in the second year with Kyle Shanahan outside of the quarterback position. These guys were really starting to get familiar with this system that has been kind of infamous for being a bit of a confusing system to learn. And Kyle Shanahan is just an absolute genius, which is going to front a lot of optimism for this team. But obviously, you can't rank the 49ers here at 14th if you're not high on Jimmy Garoppolo, which I am. So let's get into Jimmy Garoppolo and this quarterback room that is going to come in ranked tied for 9th. So in the top 10 here for the 49ers. So Jimmy Garoppolo, one of the most polarizing conversations to have in terms of ranking quarterbacks. And, you know, I've got a lot of explaining to do here with him as a top 10 quarterback. You know, to me, I'm never a kind of guy that says I need to see them, you know, do it for 20 games. I need to see them win Super Bowls, put up stats. You know, I just, you know, it's an eye test thing for me. I go off the film. I don't look at wins or stats. And the people that do look at those things are not going to share this opinion on Jimmy Garoppolo because they want to see it on paper. And you're just not going to get that with Jimmy Garoppolo. But if you want to, you know, evaluate his film, you really got to go back multiple years because he started the season for the Patriots the year that Tom Brady had the Deflategate scandal. So he started the year. Patriots were 7-point underdogs at Arizona. Everyone's saying, all right, Patriots just got to start 1-3, 2-2, just kind of survive until Tom Brady got back. Well, it turns out they happen to have a quarterback playing at an elite level, and I don't say that lightly. He was, in my opinion, one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL for those 3 weeks, and frankly, by the eye test, was better than Tom Brady in his time there in that season for the Patriots. Not that Tom Brady's bad, obviously, but Jimmy was really that good. Obviously, that's an absolute machine of a system, but you put on the film against Arizona. They would not have won that game without Jimmy Garoppolo. Absolutely not. And then his half against Miami that year, if I asked someone to just hand me the best quarterback's tape and his best half, give me the best half of football any quarterback had that year. His first half against Miami was utterly ridiculous. So the film is all there in that year, but then he got hurt and missed the fourth game that he would have had a chance to be the starter. So you do have those injury concerns. Then you got to fast forward to his time in San Francisco, where, long story short, he gets put in a little earlier than they had wanted to after trading for him, and he takes a garbage football team that was on track to having probably the first overall pick and wins 5 straight games. So he shows you that he can carry a bad team. And that's without an offseason of training in that system. Then fast forward to last season, really high expectations, obviously not a perfect team, but he has to start his season in Minnesota against a vaunted defense. His team made some mistakes, he made some mistakes, they end up losing that game. Then they beat Detroit the next week, they put up 30, and then the week after that, they had to deal with the Chiefs, and they fell down about 28-0. And things were looking a little sketchy there for the Niners, but Jimmy Garoppolo starts leading this epic comeback, like a 4-score comeback, and then he dives for a first down and ends up tearing his ACL. So to me, the tape for Jimmy Garoppolo tells itself. And there's people that don't want to spend the time watching the tape. They want to jump to conclusions because of numbers and stats. He doesn't have the yardage or the touchdowns. I get it. But when I throw on the tape of Jimmy Garoppolo, I see a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Assuming health, and I'm not really afraid of the health issues. ACLs, I keep saying it, but it's like a high ankle sprain these days. It takes longer to recover, but I'm not afraid of an ACL injury. And he clearly was no longer bothered by whatever that was that had knocked him out of New England for a couple games there. That 2016 season. So I'm really not worried about the injury thing. The ACL's a freak incident. He may hold on to the ball a little too long. He might take a hit here or there, but it really does not worry me that much. And when I watch Jimmy Garoppolo play, I say, yeah, give me that quarterback over Matt Ryan, over Cam Newton. Honestly, at times, give me that quarterback over guys like Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, Tom Brady, because he's got a better arm than those guys. I'm not going to say he's more accurate, but he has on par in terms of his processor, and then he's mobile on top of all that. So I'm just super excited to see this Niners team again with Jimmy Garoppolo. Hopefully they can keep him healthy. And, I think there's a lot of, reasonable expectations that this team can be a playoff team if Jimmy Garoppolo can stay healthy. So a lot of time on Jimmy. He's a very important cog in this machine here. Behind him, you got Nick Mullins. Showed some nice things as a young backup, but he's not going to carry this team just like we saw last year. Same thing with CJ Beathard. They're both, quality backups. You might be able to scheme up a win or two if something happened for a short-term injury for Jimmy Garoppolo. But this team's not good enough to carry a backup quarterback into the playoffs. So let's move on and talk about the running backs here. No superstar here, but you do have 3 starting caliber guys. They're going to come in tied for 13th at running back. Between Jerick McKinnon and Matt Breida, they are literally the same player. It's actually weird. McKinnon's a little heavier, but they're both 5'9". They're both from Georgia Southern. Neither of them can stay healthy for a full season. And in terms of their skill set, it's identical. Stretch runs, outside zones, great for this Shanahan scheme, great receivers out of the backfield. So between the two of them, that role should be filled. If you can get 16 healthy games, there's really not a big difference between those two, in my opinion. Now, they definitely paid Jerick McKinnon too much money, and I had said that at the time because of the injury issues and the fact that he just can't be a 3-down back because of those injury concerns. And then they go and bring in Tevin Coleman for a pretty nice, 2-year, I think $10 million contract, and he's going to have a little more of a power role, but he can do all of those things as well. I think we're going to see a very healthy combination of these 3. They're going to get the job done. In terms of fantasy football, I'm staying away from all of these guys because it's just going to be a mess. You don't know who's going to get it that week. But I do know that in this Shanahan scheme that loves to set up the play action with outside zones, all three of these guys are great outside zone runners. They're going to love checking the ball down to any of these three options. And Raheem Mostert's a poor man's version of all three of these guys. So you really run four deep with that role. You lack that, true, elite talent here, that true three-down back option. You could argue Tevin Coleman could do that because he does have some nice between-the-tackles ability, but he was never really that guy for Atlanta. So the running back room going to come in tied for 13th. They're going to help out this offense. The wide receiver room is going to come in tied for 17th. And again, it's pretty similar here with the wide receivers. You lack that true number one. But you have now, I would say, safely, three really good options here. You have Marquise Goodwin, if he can stay healthy, offers that vertical deep threat element. And then you have Dante Pettis, who I was wrong about. I just completely missed on him. I had a 5th-round pick. I thought he was too skinny, that his hands weren't good enough. He's just a great player. He might end up having to play a little more outside. We'll see how that goes. I really like him in the slot. Just because he kind of has everything you look for in a slot wide receiver. He's got good quickness, a really smart kind of option route runner, which is a great fit in this Shanahan scheme. He's just a good player. I don't know if he has the vertical ability to play on the outside consistently, so we'll see what his role looks like here this year with Pierre Garçon gone and then with Deebo Samuel in. Samuel's another kind of awkward player in a way. He certainly could be an outside wide receiver and a deep threat, but he's built more like a running back. I always pictured him playing in the slot. That is where he's listed right now on Our Lads. And then you also have Trent Taylor and Jalen Hurd, who again are more slot guys. Jalen Hurd is an intriguing player. He has the physical tools to become an outside wide receiver, but all he did at Baylor was basically play as an undersized tight end at like 6'5", 226. I see him as a bit of a Y here, as that kind of flexed in almost more like a tight end. I did not love that pick. I didn't think it was necessary. I don't really see how Jalen Hurd gets on the field here with all these guys ahead of him. You also have Kendrick Bourne, who made some plays for this team last year. So you've got a bunch of guys here. Shanahan's going to have a really fun time moving these guys around. I think Pettis, Samuel, Hurd, Taylor, we're going to see all of these guys, starting in the slot. And, with the drafting of Samuel and Jalen Hurd, they'll let Jordan Matthews compete here. I don't think he's going to make the team. He's just too redundant with all of these guys we just talked about. Matthews has always been better in the slot too. So it's a bit of a motley crew. I like all these players individually. It's a little awkward how they're all kind of shaping up right now, and I think there might be a slight learning curve to kind of figure out what these guys' roles are going to be. At least Marquise Goodwin is that defined deep threat, but it is going to be fun to see what Shanahan does to mix all these guys up. And then obviously George Kittle at tight end, second or third best tight end in the NFL. There's really not any debate about it. Just a burner. He blocks. You really can't say enough about George Kittle. It's going to be fun to see him in his first year with a full Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, he could easily rise above Travis Kelce for the number one tight end in the NFL conversation because he's a little bit of a better blocker than Kelce. Not that Kelce's a bad blocker, but Kittle's a fantastic blocker, and he's just as athletic, if not more than Kittle. And this is a system that really likes to use those tight ends. They come out with a lot of 2-3 tight end sets and love getting Kittle going on mismatches off of play action on like deep over routes and seam routes. So he is going to be the number one mismatch problem here. And with the attention he's going to draw, it will be very interesting how all of these wide receivers move around. Then you got Caden Smith, a 6th round pick, was great value in the 6th round. Local guy out of Stanford. Never going to be probably a starting guy, but he could be like an Austin Hooper, who Kyle Shanahan had in Atlanta. I honestly can't remember if he was good with Austin Hooper. Hooper's just never really stood out in his career, but I'm assuming Shanahan sees him like that, not an elite blocker, not an elite athlete, not an elite receiver, just kind of that balanced number 2 tight end. You got Garrett Selleck to kind of teach him up. Levine Toilolo's on this roster, whatever, 6'8", red zone threat. We'll see if he makes it. Ross Dwelly, This team really loves to run a lot of these 3 tight end sets. And you also got to mention Kyle Juszczyk in here with the just offensive players. They'll use him in certain ways. They'll sneak him out on play action. They'll even put him in there on third down as a running back, although with health, I don't think we see a lot of that. But you do got to mention how Kyle Shanahan, at least last year, loved 2-3 tight end sets and setting up play action out of heavy packages. So you will see some of these tight ends, even though the depth and strength is probably with these wide receivers outside of George Kittle. So tied for 17th. Kittle's special, but you lack that true number 1 wide receiver. Marquise Goodwin's got pretty major health concerns as well. If something happened to him, I don't know who's going to be the outside threat for this offense, and it could get a little bit one-dimensional in terms of just sticking with the short to intermediate game. So let's move on and talk about the offensive line. This is a major reason back in January I said 49ers at 45-1, because I was like, if they can get Bosa, they'll have the pass rush, and they had the offensive line last year that really surprised a lot of people how good this line was. We'll talk about them in just a second. And then they got the quarterback. Like, that's a core building block outside of an elite secondary now with the modern game. If you can get after their quarterback, protect your quarterback, and just have a good quarterback, that's a really great model, if not the model, for winning a Super Bowl. So, a lot of optimism here coming from this offensive line. You've got the elite tackle duo, Joe Staley and Mike McGlinchey, which was just a fantastic pick last year. Really the only tackle that you felt comfortable starting week 1. He's just a freak. His technique's fine. He's only going to continue to get better. Will be interesting to see if they keep him at right tackle forever, if they ever want to switch him over to left. It is a transition, and he's so good at right tackle. He did play left in college, so he could probably figure it out. But Joe Staley, a very good player. I believe they just gave him a 2-year contract extension. I'm sure that's kind of his timeline. He wants to play 2 more years, try to get a Super Bowl here with this current window. And if not, then he'll hit the hay for his career. So you love the tackle duo. They've revived Weston Richburg's career a little bit. He had a couple really good years there for the Giants and got a really big payday here in San Francisco. Some questions about if he was worth that, but he's a above average center. And then the guards really stepped up last year. Mike Person kind of just out of nowhere emerged as a quality starter at guard. Laken Tomlinson, a former first-round pick, they were able to kind of get him in this new scheme that utilizes a lot of outside zone and kind of, it takes away some of his weaknesses in terms of technique and is able to utilize his athleticism a little better. So you got a great starting lineup there on the offensive line, but you also love that you've got depth here. You've got Joshua Garnett, a first-round pick in 2016, has never really been able to figure it out, but you could do a hell of a lot worse than him as a starting or as a sixth man on the inside. The tackle depth is a concern. You got Sean Coleman, Justin Schooley, a 6th-round pick. And then you also have Wesley Johnson at center for a good backup. They picked him up. And then Ben Garland can also play in a pinch. So at least on the interior, you do have some depth. You got to keep McGlinchey and Staley healthy, though, because that would certainly be a concern. So the offensive line coming in 9th for me, definitely going to be an asset for this team. It's not a coincidence that we spent about our first 12 or 13 deep dives saying a lot of these offensive lines are going to hinder this team and what they want to do on offense. And now that we're getting into the top 15, we're talking about a lot more lines that are going to help their teams do what they want to do. There was weeks last year where this Niners team was just steamrolling dudes, and it didn't matter who their running back was, it didn't matter who their quarterback was, this offensive line was just working. So the offense as a whole, gonna come in 7th, which is gonna sound high. It's a total projection. It obviously was not a top 7 offense last year, but with who I project as a top 10 quarterback, with a top 5 offensive coordinator as they come in here tied for 6th in terms of offensive coaching culture, Kyle Shanahan. I mean, we saw what he did with Matt Ryan. a couple years ago in Atlanta when they went on to go to the Super Bowl and almost win it. I mean, his play calling is just spectacular. It was so fun to watch him last year with a backup quarterback and then his third string coming in. It just kind of get creative and create offense. And you pair that with the offensive line and quarterback combination, paired with some pretty exciting weapons here as well. You know, tied for 17th doesn't sound like a whole lot, but they got a lot to work with here. It could be an extremely explosive offense, especially when you look at the defensive side of the ball and have some pretty major question marks there, and look at this offense as a team that might have to Kansas City their way into 35, 40-point games to pull out wins sometimes, which is something I think they will be capable of. So let's transition now to the defense, which is going to come in ranked 28th here. Now, they've got the pieces here. We already talked about Nick Bosa coming in here and this D-line being a big asset for this team. But, you know, spoiler alert, there's some problems in this secondary. We'll reveal their ranking in the secondary in just a second. But just the overall culture here, you got a lot of new faces. It's a team that was just not good on this side of the ball last year at all. And they got a lot to figure out here, even though the defensive coordinator here is the same with Robert Saleh, trying to establish that Jacksonville, Seattle 4-3, cover 3 press man scheme, which is very common in the NFL. So anyway, let's start with the run defense here. And we keep saying in these deep dives that run defense, it doesn't matter. You know, there's not a big difference between 4 and 26, but the thing we've also been saying is that you can't be last year's Chargers. You can't just get steamrolled in the run game. As easy it is to find guys on the interior that can play well against the run and eat up blocks and all that and get a little push, as easy as they are to find, you still need to have them. And that's a concern here for me with the 49ers. This is really the first team that I can say that about a team that I don't know how well they're going to be able to, stop the run. You got DeForest Buckner, who's a fantastic player. Little bit of an easy block in a way against the run. He's by no means bad against the run, but he's not some elite run defender. He's 6'7", 300 pounds. It's a little easier to get under that guy's pads and push him back a little bit. Now he can make up for it with some athleticism, and DeForest Buckner isn't my big concern here. It's the guys next to him. You're going to be playing Arik Armstead and Solomon Thomas inside a lot here. Teams are going to be able to exploit that. They are not good interior run defenders. It's a big reason they have tried these guys on the edge on early downs in their career and probably will continue to do some of that. You've got Sheldon Day, very much replacement level, whatever. DJ Jones, a 6th round pick in 2017. He hasn't worked out. Cedric Thornton, whatever, journeyman. And then you have Contavious Street, who's, again, kind of that Arik Armstead, Solomon Thomas, trying to be that sort of Michael Bennett role in this Seattle scheme with that oversized edge, undersized interior guy who's going to play outside on rundowns and inside on passing downs. So I really do see this team having a pretty hard time stopping the run, to be honest. It's not the end of the world. We don't put a lot of weight in run defense, but it is not going to help this defense. But let's transition to the pass rush, which is a much more important and positive conversation to have. Now, you have some projection here because you got DeForest Buckner, who's a fantastic player. He was on my list of breakouts last year as a guy that we thought maybe could get into that conversation like with Fletcher Cox, Aaron Donald, like seriously tier 1 elite. He's in that tier 2 elite. He's a fantastic player. He's one of the 10 best just interior pass rushers in the NFL, arguably one of the 10 best pass rushers in the NFL, period. So you love what you have in DeForest Buckner. He is just a handful in the middle. He's extremely fast off the ball, quick feet, really good hand fighter, and he is definitely going to benefit from the 2 additions on the edge here with D Ford, who they go and trade for. Yes, they probably paid him too much money, but they can afford it. And, I wouldn't have loved it if someone went and got D Ford to be their number 1 edge rusher, but as your second best edge rusher and your third best pass rusher on your roster, I can absolutely get behind that. So he's going to be a beast there in that role as the third best pass rusher on this roster, because Nick Bosa, as a rookie, who is really a carbon copy of his brother Joey, who just was a dominant impact from the get-go, and I don't see any reason outside of maybe hamstring issues that Nick Bosa can't be a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL as a rookie. So, assuming Bosa can be that, and assuming DeForest Buckner can maybe take a step up with some of this, relieved double and triple teams that you aren't going to be able to spend as much time on DeForest Buckner. That's all being projected here, but seriously, the ceiling for this pass rush, I don't even have words to explain it, because that alone with those three is ridiculous, but you haven't even talked about Arik Armstead and Solomon Thomas yet. Armstead, I'm not expecting a ton from him, but he's going to compete here with Solomon Thomas, who just 2 years ago, we were talking about him in similar lights that we had about Ed Oliver. I liked Ed Oliver a little better than Solomon Thomas, but he is that freak undersized interior rusher. To me, the biggest reason he hasn't worked out here is they've tried to use him more as an edge rusher. Well, now they're not going to be able to really do that because you got Bosa and Ford here, and he, at the end of last season, really came into his own, being used much, much more on the interior, where I think he can use that quickness and leverage that make him so special much better. So, he's a wild card here. He has not lived up to the hype, but if he can become just a star interior rusher paired with the rest of these guys, good freaking luck. And it doesn't matter who you have in the secondary, honestly, if your pass rush is this good. So we're ranking them 7th because they do have some kind of molding to do here and growing to do, but the upside here has to be, if you were just ranking ceilings here, it has to be number 1 here. It could just be so freaking ridiculous to watch this pass rush next year, and it's not going to take a lot to go right. So they'll rank 7th behind those names we just mentioned. No one else really on the interior worth talking about here, because Armstead, Thomas, Buckner, those 3 guys are all just kind of going to rotate unless Kentavious Street really makes some strides as a third down interior rusher, a 4th round pick in 2018. You do have Ronald Blair here, who played at a replacement level role last year, a replacement level as a 5th round pick in 2016. He's fine. You got Julian Taylor, a 7th round pick last year. They're fine as depth, but they're not going to move the needle here in any respect. So they're going to rank tied for 7th, but this pass rush here, make no doubt about it. When we say betting on the 49ers at 45-1 to win the Super Bowl, if they're going to be a Super Bowl team, it's going to be because this defensive line becomes one of the 3 best units in the NFL and an elite force for this defense that can help everyone in the 2nd and 3rd level be better because of how much of a problem they are up front. I can't guarantee you that happens, but there is a good chance. So then you look at the linebackers here. Fred Warner and Quan Alexander, really good duo, uber athleticism. Now, a big reason that run defense comes in a little bit lower and is a concern is that neither of these guys are thumpers. They're both, a little bit closer to the size of a safety than a traditional run defending linebacker. Now, I'm never the kind of guy that says draft big linebackers. I think side-to-side coverage ability from linebackers is much more important. And a lot of people criticize the signing of Kwan Alexander. I don't know why I called him K1. It's Quan Alexander. He's got injury concerns and he might have some tackling problems. You could make the argument that he got overpaid because he was paid like one of the best linebackers in the NFL. He's one of the 10 to 12 best linebackers in the NFL, in my opinion. But the position itself, with the way offenses are structured these days, with these short to intermediate games and the importance of being able to stop RPOs, screen games, and just be able to run from sideline to sideline at that position, I think the linebacker position in general is underpaid. So I have no problems paying Quan Alexander, especially when you had just a drastic hole left by Reuben Foster's kind of off-field issues. So I was totally with that signing. And then you've got Fred Warner, who is just, you can make a case one of the 10 best athletes in the NFL, pound for pound. Just ridiculous. It translated as a rookie. Again, not much of a run defender, but the coverage ability you're going to have in the 2nd level here is going to help everything out. So the linebacker room going to come in tied for 11th. Now, Quan's got to stay healthy. After those 2, you got Malcolm Smith, kind of whatever, replacement level veteran, very familiar with this scheme. He was hurt last year. You got Dre Greenlaw, an athletic 5th-round pick this year. David Mayo, veteran, whatever. Markin Zachwa, don't know anything about him. Elijah Lee, really athletic guy. He could play, but not at a very high level, but he's a good athlete. He can play. And then Leroy Reynolds, kind of a similar play to Malcolm Smith there. So you do have some depth, but it would certainly be a drop-off as with any team at linebacker. So they're going to come in tied for 11th there with the linebacker room, with the athleticism you have there with those two starters, kind of trying to mirror what a team like Jacksonville has in Miles Jack and Telvin Smith. But then you get to the secondary here, which is a concern and is the number one reason you could project some pretty bad games here from this defense. You do have Richard Sherman, who's going to do his job, still a very good player, despite his age and kind of the ankle injuries he's had later on in his career here. But he's solid. He's not going to run stride for stride with the faster receivers in the NFL or be very good in man coverage, but inside this scheme, he's still a very good player. I think ideally he would be your number 2 corner at this stage in his career, but he would be number 1 on a good chunk of teams as he is for this Niners team. And he certainly has to play in a scheme like this, which is that press cover 3 style, where you're just basically going vertical. You're not using a whole lot of lateral quickness in this scheme as an outside corner. But the biggest question on this entire defense is who the hell is playing corner opposite of Richard Sherman? The nickel's fine. You got Jimmy Ward and Kwan Williams, who are both starting caliber nickel players. Jimmy Ward is actually a pretty nice player. I was surprised they were able to get him for the price that they did. I thought he would come in closer to that Bryce Callahan or Justin Coleman money. He's just a good solid nickel corner. He's got versatility. He could even win this outside corner job. Who knows? He can play safety too. But I look at that opposite corner of Richard Sherman. I mean, wow, is it a question mark? Akello Witherspoon was one of the worst rated corners in the NFL last year. Uber athlete, but just has not proved that he can play football in the NFL. He might be the favorite to win this job because you got Jason Verrett, who, 3 years ago was one of the best corners in the NFL, but he's been injured for the season. Before the season even started, the last 3 years, like what's going to change here? And even if he is healthy, history would tell you that player's not going to be the same. So what do you get from Jason Verrett here on a 1-year prove-it deal for almost nothing? You got Tavares Moore, who's a converted college safety, a good athlete, but I have no confidence that he can step out there. I see him as a guy that's going to have to continue to learn here under Richard Sherman and maybe be the heir apparent as the outside corner there behind him. But God, I would not feel good starting him. You draft Tim Harris in the 6th round. You've got Greg Mabin. That's really it. The cornerback situation here is going to be a problem. And even Richard Sherman can be exploited. He is not some lockdown corner. You don't want him covering a whole lot of slants and deep overs. Like, he's going to get beat in those situations. He's very good just in a straight line vertical. But yeah, the cornerback room not very good. And then safety is probably even worse. Adrian Colbert, one of the worst safeties in the NFL last year. He's projected to be the starting free safety here. You got a bunch of guys behind him who I don't think can play but are going to compete. Anton Exum, he's been, a veteran, if not a journeyman here. I know he used to be on the Vikings, but, he's fine, but he's not a guy you're comfortable starting. DJ Reed, a 5th-round pick last year who I liked, but he's undersized. Marcel Harris, a 6th-round pick last year. For a team that you might get into some shootouts and just ask these safeties to just not give up huge plays, I'm not confident that you're going to get that here. I think the safety play is going to be the worst in the NFL. Jaquisti Tartt's a fine player, but he's kind of the Cam Chancellor role in this defense. He's not a rangy center fielder by any means. And just this scheme in general. I think it's a big reason this defense struggled so much last year. This scheme puts a lot of pressure on those high free safeties to be that traditional rangy Earl Thomas role. You don't have to be Earl Thomas, but you do have to be a smart cover guy that takes good calculated risks and has good range, and they don't have anything close to that right now. So the secondary is a mess. It's a big reason this defense comes in 28th. Now, If this D-line can be the best in the NFL and be an absolute elite unit, they can replicate what the Eagles did in 2017 with just a dominant, unblockable front. It's not like the Eagles had this amazing secondary that year, and with that pass rush, that's what allowed guys like Patrick Robinson to have like breakout years, which could easily happen with like Jimmy Ward here. So 28th for the defense. The defensive coaching culture comes in tied for 29th. It's a high upside defense. I think by the end of the year, if this pass rush all comes together, it should be a top 15 to 20 defense. But man, does this secondary concern me. And they are going to have to really continue to draft well because Richard Sherman's not getting any younger. And he's the only player that I'm frankly comfortable starting here other than Jaquiski Tartt, but he plays the least important position in this secondary in terms of coverage. And the nickel corners are fine, I guess. But the free safety and the outside corners, you're going to get attacked by some of the better quarterbacks in this league. So now that we've gone through all of that, let's reveal this schedule and my win total expectations. So this team, over-under of 8 wins. And before I reveal this, it is going to be a little shocking, even with how high I am on this Niners team. Here we go. I have them at 12-4 this year. I had no idea I would have them with this many wins until I saw this schedule. It is a very forgiving schedule. So you're going to start at Tampa Bay, at Cincinnati. I think they can win those 2 games on the road, which if you can start 2-0 on the road, that third game at home, I don't know how many of you have been to an NFL home opener, but you add on to the fact that you're 2-0 heading into that, it is not going to be easy for Pittsburgh to go into San Francisco and win this game that is going to be electric. And then you can really say the same thing about Cleveland the next game. So those won't be easy wins. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, a couple road games. It's never easy to win on the road in the NFL, but I do think that shapes up very nicely for them to actually start 4-0. Then they do have to go to the Rams. That would probably be their first loss for me. They play at Washington, not an easy road win, but you could do a lot worse than at Washington. Just their road games in general. You want to get the easy games on the road, in my opinion. Tampa Bay, Baltimore, Washington, Cincinnati, and then you have Arizona in your division. It's a lot better to get the harder teams at home because you can go on the road with a good quarterback and a good pass rush and win against lesser competition. So then they Carolina, Arizona, I've got them splitting those. And then you have a 3-game homestand in one of the more important stretches of the season here. Seattle, Arizona, Green Bay. Again, to get Green Bay at home, that's a lucky draw. At Baltimore, if Lamar Jackson's even starting there, it's not going to be that hard to beat Lamar Jackson. Who knows? Could be Robert Griffin by then. At New Orleans, that won't be easy. But then you have Atlanta at home the next week. We've all seen Matt Ryan on the road in meaningful games. It doesn't look pretty. Then you finish up with the Rams in Seattle, which are going to be just epic games for this NFC West that, to me, is going to be very tight. I think the Rams, will have their deep dive, but there's reason to project some regression there. They've lost some players, and then Ty Gurley, his whole situation. And then Seattle, I just think San Francisco has a more talented roster overall. They just don't have the culture and quarterback that Seattle has. So I think this division's going to be pretty tight. Those last 2 games are going to be really fun and meaningful. As far as the odds are for this team, to start with the division, like we just mentioned, I see this as almost a 3-way split. Yeah, I would say the Niners are probably third in terms of that, but I haven't looked at their schedule yet for Seattle and the Rams, but I doubt it's as favorable as this. So at plus 550 for the 49ers to win this division, I love that. And then, if they do win 12 games like we're saying here, they're probably getting a first-round bye, and you're getting a team with a first-round bye right now at 33-1 to win the Super Bowl. That's certainly a great bet, in my opinion, especially with a quarterback, offensive line, edge rush, coach combination like this. Those are, the meat and potatoes of winning football games right there, along with the secondary, which is not very good here. But, you could do a lot worse than 33-1 still. I loved him at 45-1, and I'm glad I got that down when I did. But, man, this is all shaping up really well. And then talk about this over-under at 8 wins. I don't see how this team doesn't go over that. Jimmy Garoppolo, 40-1 to win the MVP.
I mean, 2 years ago, we said the Eagles were my money-making team, my kind of flag team. We've got a bunch of teams that we got some takes on, but, you know, if you came to me and said, who are you betting on this year? You get to make one bet. And last year it was the Jags to miss the playoffs. I was like, everyone, just bet your house against Blake Bortles. Like, everyone thinks they're good, they're going to suck, and they did. This year, it is Jimmy Garoppolo being better than people expect, and this 49ers team being an incredibly relevant football team. You know, they're my moneymaker this year. We'll see if that holds up, if I can go 3 years in a row being right about my big take. But I'm loving this 49ers team. I'm excited to hear what the Niners fans say here. If I'm crazy, if I'm too high, the rest of you NFL fans, let me know as well. We'll see you in a couple days for the next deep dive. Hit that like button. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.